可以了是吧？好。Welcome to another video in the chapter of data collection methods. I'm Ni Cuiping. In this video, we will discuss interviews, which are another very important data collection approach in nursing studies. What are interviews? Participants in a study often have information that can only be obtained by asking questions. Interviews are conversations between researchers and their study participants. Interviews can be used in both qualitative and quantitative studies, although the style and process differ. From the quantitative perspective, interview questions are usually focused and a researcher works from an interview schedule or guide. Questions or items in the schedule may be direct, for example, asking about a participant's level of pain, or more indirect by using a combination of items to estimate to what degree the respondent has some trait or characteristics, for example, anxiety. Items may be closed-ended, requiring a yes or no response or a specific response to a series of statements, or open-ended, allowing the participant to provide as much information in their response as they think is necessary to answer the question. So, from the structures of interview questions, there are three formats of interview, such as unstructured, semi-structured, or structured interviews. Unstructured interviews are informal and conversational and may be useful during the early stages of qualitative studies. Semi-structured interviews also were called topical or guided interview, which are organized around a set of open-ended questions. Most qualitative interviews are semi-structured interviews. The degree of guidance may be as minimal as having a few initial questions or prompts, or as structured as multiple predefined questions to narrow the interview or specific aspects of the phenomenon being studied. In either case, the researchers remains open to how the participant responds and carefully words follow-up questions or prompts to allow the participant's view or perspective to emerge. Structured interviews are organized with narrower questions in a specific order. In the next part, we discuss the structured interviews because it's the frequently used format interview in the quantitative study. Structured interviews are verbal interaction with participants that allow the researcher to exercise increasing amount of control over the content of the interview for the purpose of obtaining essential data. The researcher designs the questions before data collection begins, and the order of questions is specified. There are several features of structured interviews. The first is that the process for developing and sequencing interview questions progresses from broad and general to narrow and specific. Questions are grouped by topic, with fairly safe topics being addressed first and sensitive topics reserved until late in the interview process to make participants feel more comfortable in responding. The second feature is the type of questions. A structured interview makes use of closed-ended questions predominantly, while an unstructured interview makes use of open-ended questions predominantly. Closed-ended questions allow the interviewer to limit the interviewee to a range of possible responses in line with the research context. Here is an example of a structured interview. Researchers conducted in a structured interview to conduct a comprehensive prenatal psychosocial risk screening in women receiving prenatal care in health centers. The interview involved using the prenatal risk overview instrument. A staff member administered the instrument, which took an average of 10 to 15 minutes to complete to all clinic prenatal care patients at their intake appointment. The instrument consisted of 58 questions that addressed 30 psychosocial domains. For example, telephone access, transportation access, food security, housing stability, and social support, and others. Domains were scored high, moderate, or low risk based on participants' responses. For example, in transportation access domain, the questions is like, can you get a car or other transportation when you need it? The responsive alternatives are no access to a car or other transportation, or only rare access, which is scored as high risk. Another responsive alternative is access only some of the time, which is scored as a moderate risk. And the third responsive alternative is access all the time, which is scored as low risk. So this is structured interview. Now we move to the advantages and the disadvantages of interviews. The first is about the advantages. The interview is a flexible technique that can allow researchers to explore greater depth of meaning than they can obtain with other techniques. Use your interpersonal skills to encourage your subjects' cooperation and elicit more information. And the next advantage is about the response rate. The response rate to interviews is higher than the response rate to the questionnaires. And next, interviews allow researchers to collect data from participants who are unable or unlikely to complete questionnaires, such as very ill subjects or those whose reading, writing, and ability to express their thoughts are marginal. The advantages are interviewing requires much more time than do questionnaires and skills, and it's more costly. Because of time and cost, the sample size usually is limited. Okay, those are all the interviews. Thank you.